The alarm tore through the command deck before I even opened my eyes. Red light washed over every wall. My hands found the console before my mind caught up with what was happening. 43 ships had dropped out of the dark on the far edge of our system, and every one of them was heading straight for Earth. My name is Nora Whitfield, and on that night I was the last voice standing between our planet and an enemy we had never even seen before that moment. The reports came in fast, too fast to process calmly. Our outer sensors, the ones we had spent a decade building along the edge of the solar system, had caught only a flicker before the enemy fleet appeared. No warning, no signal, just 43 shapes moving with a purpose that chilled me more than any weapon reading on my screen. I called for silence in the room, and for a moment, everyone actually listened. That silence lasted 3 seconds before someone shouted that the enemy fleet had changed course. Faster now, aimed directly at the inner colonies. I had trained for years for a moment like this, but nothing prepares you for the sound of 100 people trying to breathe quietly while staring at a screen that shows their own extinction approaching. I opened a channel to the fleet command bunker beneath the Atlantic control station. A man named Callum Doyle answered, his voice steady in a way that made me trust him instantly, even though we had never met in person. He told me the truth without softening it. Our defense grid could slow them. It could not stop them. Not with the ships we had ready, not with the weapons we had built. If we fought them head-on, in the open, with everything visible, they would simply grind through us the way water wears down stone. I asked him what he suggested, and for a long moment he said nothing. Then he said one word: silence. He explained it in seconds, because seconds were all we had. If the enemy believed we were already broken, already dying, they would slow down. They would stop treating us like a threat, and start treating us like a formality. And in that gap, in that small window, where they believed the fight was already over, we could move everything we had left into position without being seen. It was a terrible plan. It meant staging our own death. It meant convincing an enemy fleet, and possibly convincing every other species listening across the stars, that humanity had lost. I did not have time to argue. I gave the order. Every outward transmission from Earth was cut, except for one. A single broadcast, sent wide and unencrypted, meant to be heard by anyone listening. I wrote it myself, standing in that shaking command room, my voice cracking halfway through. I said we were holding the line. I said we had tried. I said to tell them we did not manage to hold on. Then I ordered every system to go dark. The next 71 days were the longest of my life. We worked in bunkers lit only by emergency lamps, moving ships without transponders, building weapons platforms in complete silence, training pilots who were told they might never see daylight again if this failed. Every person on that project understood the same truth. If our silence did not fool the enemy, there would be no second chance. I remember standing beside Callum Doyle in the depths of that bunker, both of us covered in dust from tunnels dug too fast to be safe, staring at a map of our own solar system glowing faintly on the wall. He asked me if I thought it would work. I told him I did not know, but that I would rather die trying to protect something than die waiting to be destroyed. He nodded, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled. On the 71st day, the enemy fleet finally moved close enough to strike. They came in slow, almost lazy, the way a predator approaches something it believes is already dead. Their formation spread wide across the edge of our defense line, confident, careless, exactly as we had hoped. I gave the signal. Every hidden platform we had built in silence came online at once. Every ship we had kept dark and drifting suddenly lit up with full power. The enemy fleet had no time to reorganize. They had walked straight into a trap built entirely from patience and grief we were forced to fake. The battle that followed was fast, brutal in its speed but not in cruelty, a clash of strategy more than anything else. Our ships moved with precision, built from 71 days of preparation, striking exactly where the enemy formation was weakest. Within hours, the enemy fleet broke apart and retreated into the dark, scattered and far weaker than when they arrived. We had won. But victory did not feel like triumph. It felt like exhaustion so deep it settled into my bones. We had saved our world by pretending to lose it. And somewhere out there, drifting through the void, our final broadcast was still traveling outward, carrying the sound of a message meant to sound like the end of everything. I did not think about that broadcast again for a long time. There was too much rebuilding to do, too many systems to restore, too many families waiting for news about people who had spent 71 days underground. Life slowly returned to something normal, though none of us who lived through those days ever felt fully at ease again. It was almost 18 years later when I received a message that brought that entire memory rushing back. I was working at the orbital station above Earth, overseeing communication systems that had grown far beyond anything we had during the war. A young technician named Ellis Bryant called me over to his station, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly on the controls. He told me a fleet had entered our system, not attacking, not moving with aggression, just drifting in slowly, broadcasting a language our systems had never recorded before. My heart sank immediately. After everything we had survived, the idea of another unknown fleet arriving filled me with a fear I thought I had buried years ago. We prepared as calmly as we could, though calm was hard to find. Ships moved into formation. Communication teams worked frantically to translate the incoming signals. I stood at the command station, feeling the same tight grip of tension I remembered from that first night so many years earlier. Then the translation came through, and it was nothing like what I expected. The message spoke of grief. It spoke of arriving to honor the fallen. It mentioned our final broadcast from all those years ago, word for word, as if they had kept it stored and studied every syllable. They believed we were gone. They had traveled across an unimaginable distance to attend what they thought would be humanity's funeral. I almost laughed, though there was nothing funny about it. The weight of what that meant settled over me slowly. Somewhere out there, an entire alien society had carried our sorrow with them for nearly 2 decades, believing they were arriving too late to save us, only intending now to honor what remained. I gave the order to allow their lead vessel through Earth's defense perimeter, though every instinct in me stayed alert, ready for anything. Their ship descended with a grace that felt almost gentle, nothing like the aggressive approach of the enemy fleet from years before. When their delegation finally stepped onto the receiving platform at our station, I felt the entire room hold its breath. Their leader introduced himself through a translator device strapped to his chest. His name, as close as our language could shape it, was Valen Thren. He stood taller than any of us, his skin a soft gray that shimmered faintly under the station lights, his eyes wide and dark, filled with an emotion that looked remarkably like sorrow. He looked at me, and at the room full of living, breathing humans surrounding him, and for a long moment, he said nothing at all. Then he asked, quietly, if this was truly Earth, and if we were truly the same people who sent that final broadcast so long ago. I told him yes. I told him everything. I explained the silence, the trap, the battle, the survival that followed. I watched his expression shift with every word, moving from disbelief to something closer to wonder. He explained why they had come. Their species, the Thren Collective, had detected our broadcast from a great distance. Their culture held a deep tradition of honoring species who fought bravely, even in defeat. They had spent years preparing an expedition, meant only to lay symbolic offerings at whatever remained of our worlds, expecting to find ruins, expecting to find silence permanent instead of temporary. Instead, they found a civilization not just alive, but thriving, expanding, rebuilding stronger than before. Valen asked me something that stayed with me long after that day. He asked how a species could choose to appear defeated, to let the rest of the galaxy believe they had fallen, purely as a strategy to protect what they loved. I told him it was not easy. I told him it nearly broke every person who took part in that decision. But I explained that sometimes survival means accepting temporary sorrow to prevent permanent loss. He listened closely, translating my words carefully to his companions standing behind him. One by one, their expressions shifted from solemn respect to something far deeper. Then, without warning, without any command that I could see, the entire delegation knelt. Not out of weakness, not out of surrender. It was a gesture I later learned was reserved among their people for moments of profound honor, offered only to those who displayed courage beyond what their species believed possible. I stood there, stunned, watching an alien delegation kneel in the middle of our station, surrounded by human engineers, pilots, and scientists who had no idea how to react to what they were witnessing. Valen rose first. his translator carrying his voice steady and clear across the room. He said they had crossed the stars expecting to mourn a fallen people, only to discover a species willing to accept the appearance of death itself in order to protect life. He said such courage was rare among the many worlds his people had encountered, and that they wished to honor it properly, not with sorrow, but with respect. Word of their arrival spread quickly across Earth. People gathered near viewing stations just to catch a glimpse of the alien ships hovering peacefully above our planet. Fear slowly gave way to curiosity, and curiosity gave way to something closer to hope. Over the following weeks, representatives from the Thren Collective remained in orbit, exchanging knowledge with our scientists, sharing pieces of their history in careful, measured amounts. They spoke of other worlds they had visited, some thriving, some lost entirely to conflict or disaster. They spoke of their own struggles, their own losses, and slowly, the distance between our two very different species began to shrink. I spent many long nights speaking with Valen personally, learning more about a culture built around memory and honor, rather than conquest. He told me they rarely made contact with species who had not already proven themselves capable of surviving hardship. Our broadcast, our silence, our victory, had marked us as a people worth knowing. One evening, standing beside him at the observation window overlooking Earth, I asked him what would have happened if his people had truly arrived to find us gone. He was quiet for a long time before answering. He told me they would have honored our memory regardless, offering respect to a species that fought until the very end, even in loss. He said that sorrow given freely to a stranger says something important about the heart of those who give it. Then he turned to me and said that finding us alive, finding us stronger than before, had changed something within his own people as well. He said they had arrived prepared to grieve, and instead, they were leaving inspired. I never expected the night of our darkest moment to lead to something like this. I never imagined that the broadcast meant to trick an enemy would one day reach the ears of a species willing to travel across the stars simply to honor us. Standing there, watching Earth turn slowly below us, lights glowing across cities that had once gone completely dark out of necessity, I understood something clearly for the first time. Sometimes the moments we believe mark our ending become the very moments that define our beginning. The Thren Collective eventually departed, promising to return, carrying with them stories of a species who chose to appear defeated in order to remain unbroken. Their departure was not filled with sadness, but with a quiet sense of connection neither of our species had expected to find. I remained at that station for years afterward, continuing my work, watching Earth grow stronger with each passing season. Occasionally, on quiet nights, I would think back to that first broadcast, the one meant to sound like an ending, and I would remember how close we came to losing everything, and how far we managed to rise instead. The silence we once used as a weapon eventually became a story of hope, carried far beyond anything we could have imagined that night in the command room, when fear and determination pushed me to make a decision that would shape the future of an entire planet. And though the details of that night still linger in my memory, sharp and vivid even after all these years, what stays with me most is not the fear, or the danger, or even the victory itself. What stays with me is the image of an alien delegation, kneeling quietly on our station, honoring a species they believed had fallen, only to discover we had simply been waiting in the dark, preparing to rise again.